sound way more impressive on paper. So I just wanted to set up for the fact that I wrote most of that so that my mom would hear it. It is an absolute pleasure to be here today. For me, this is certainly one of the highlights of my year. I love speaking with folks who are interested in what we have to say at PayPal, but more importantly, hoping to give you some idea or glimpse into life after the university. So there's a lot of it. The one thing I'm certain of that nobody in this room has peaked. The best days are in front of everybody in this room. There's a million things going on out there, and you're all going to find a path that makes perfect sense. In my elongated bio there, that really is just my, I say that to myself every morning in the mirror when I'm brushing my teeth to remind me that I need to be a little bit greater than yesterday. In my new role of North America, head of North America and PayPal, I'm responsible for about $11 billion of revenue for PayPal. We do about $18 billion in total around the world, and about $11 billion of it comes through the organizations that I work with. I run about 5 different businesses for PayPal. But what it really boils down to is our earnings call is today, later on today, where our CEO and CFO will be on the phone with the investor relations group and all the investors that are listening in on the call, and they will take a series of calls about how the third quarter shaped up and what the future looks like. And there's two sides to this story. There's always two sides to every story, but in PayPal, it's about the math of PayPal. Did we grow the business? Did we add new merchants? Did we add new consumers? What kind of transactions are we getting? But more importantly, it's about the narrative. Are we living up to the mission of PayPal? And the mission of PayPal is to democratize the ability to access financial services. And so for us, that means people that are underbanked or underserved or have to go to check cashing or payday loans, people around the world that don't have the same access as we here in this room have to financial services, we need to make that available. And so when we wake up in the morning, it's not necessarily worrying about earnings, it's worrying about propelling that mission going forward. And I think that's a really critical element. And as you move forward in your careers, look for a place where you actually have passion for the result, not just for the interim steps, which might be financially motivated or divisional motivated, but actually have a greater impact on the world. Those are the people that tend to be a lot happier in their jobs. And the job isn't something that you have to go to, it's something that you run to. I can tell you that every morning when I come to work, I'm more excited about the opportunity in front of me than I even was when I left the night before. And I think that's a good environment. It took me a while to get there. That wasn't always the case, but it certainly is the case moving forward. So I'm going to go through this presentation a little bit. It's got a few slides in it. Most of them are just totally goofy. This is what happens when you allow your head of marketing to make your presentation and then let you know what it looks like on your flight over here. So she said, I want to tell the audience a little bit about who you are and what motivates you, and then a little bit about your, what PayPal is, and then a little bit about your philosophy. So in doing so, she comes up with that picture. I am a world-class warrior, and that was the last time I wore a suit. So, and I totally rocked that look, by the way. I am a warrior, and by that I mean that I always feel like there's more that I need to know and more than I need to learn. I'm not worried about competition. I'm not worried about whether I'm moving up in the organization or moving down in the organization or anything like that. I always feel like my best days are in front of me, and it's almost my obligation to find out what those are. And we were just talking with the president, Tom Sullivan, earlier, and talked to him a little bit about the philosophy of learning. And for me, I'm very concerned about what influences I haven't gotten. I did an interview for the Vermont Quarterly, and we talked about what shaped you at UVM. And for me, it was about introducing me to all of the concepts and ideas and a diversity of thought that I've never been to before. And so, it's great to, I never had the focus when I was at UVM to know exactly what I wanted to do when I left. In fact, I probably was 5% of the way into what I thought my career would be. So I always worried about what I didn't know. And I bumped into as many people as I possibly could. I had as many conversations as I possibly could, just because I knew that there were great ideas out there, and I knew I didn't have access to them until I actually made that effort. So I am a world-class worrier. I work with a bunch of world-class worriers who are constantly concerned about what we don't know, not necessarily being an expert at what we do know. So my transformation at UVM was apparently hair-driven. I clearly was far more concerned about hair care products when I came into the university than when I left the university. But the transformation was certainly elemental in the way of my thinking. I think maybe this is also maybe a visual cue to my personal growth, which was I was far more buttoned up when I left the university than when I entered the university. Again, maybe that was the last time I ever wore a suit, but it was a transformative time because I really felt like I changed. Sometimes people come to the university and they feel like I know what I want to be and I want to gather all the evidence to support that. Mine was exactly the opposite. I had no idea what I wanted to be, and I wanted to make sure that whatever good idea was out there that could help shape my future self, I brought myself into. I was talking earlier, and I took a lot of English courses. I took some of the pre-med courses because I was really interested in that. I worked at the theater and set design, trying to get that influence of art and science. I always live in a balance between art and science, so I wear 2 watches. I have an art watch and I have a science watch. And so I'm constantly reminded all the time that there is a numbers element to things, but more importantly, there's a human element to everything. So these are the companies that I've worked for in my career. All of them are kind of financial in their heritage. PaineWebber was the first one. I actually went in to start small businesses to have 401k and retirement plans. I didn't want to sell stocks and bonds to individuals, but I wanted to have a meaningful impact on people's lives, and I thought the best way to do that would be to help them start retirement accounts. When I first started in 1988, 89 with PaineWebber, most people hadn't really small businesses didn't really have the ability to set up 401ks and ESOP plans and all of those. And so I actually went knocking on doors, talking to small businesses to set up accounts. And I knew that if I did it right, people's retirements would be better. I felt better when I did it than before I met those companies. I know that they were in better shape after I left those companies because I essentially had created a positive impact on their employee workforce. Then I went to Citi. From Citi I went to GE to start a new business. It was really fun. We started a new business. I was the 3rd employee for the business of GE. And we grew that to $11.323 billion of volume. We ended up selling that business to American Express for $1.15 billion, which was a really exciting time. So that's how I ended up at American Express. And then about 5 years ago, I ended up at PayPal. So people often ask me, who did you work for? But what I really work for is this team right here. And the most important things in my life will always be my wife of 25 years, Laura, my wonderful son, Robert III. This is us in Cambodia. We travel all over the place. But at the end of the day, what grounds me is my ability to create an environment that's great for them. I want to be able to create an environment that's great for my family, and I travel a lot. Last year I did 325,000 miles in the air. There are pilots that do less than that. I use the LIFO principle, so the accounting principle transferred to travel, which is I'm always the last one into a meeting, I'm the first one out of a meeting. So when I go to London next week, I break from an ops review with our CEO. It goes from 8 to 11. I have to leave at 10:30. I go right to the airport, I get on an airplane, I land in London at 7 a.m. I work from basically 9 o'clock in the morning in our London offices after I get out of the airport. I go from 9 o'clock in the morning all the way through the day. I have dinners, I have a couple client meetings, we have an outing that we have to go to, and by 1 o'clock in the morning, the next morning, I will be back on the airplane flying home. So that's the definition of LIFO, which means I get to have as many breakfasts and dinners with my family as possible, tuck in our son to bed, but I still work as crazy hours. It takes a lot of sleeping on airplanes. I'm really good at sleeping sitting up. I'm really good at fighting over the neutral territory between the 2 seats and establishing my dominance early so that I can own the middle seat. So it's from the tips of the road for you. But it's really a critical element that I think, I have a sense of urgency about me. Silicon Valley has an inherent sense of urgency, but my real sense of urgency is built by the fact that at the end of the day, these are the most important people in my life, and I make sure that everything else I do fits in around that. So who is PayPal? First of all, I love this shot because this is the PayPal headquarters, and that's my office right there. Now this is our CEO's office, and I always tell him I'm a little bit closer to the center of the action, and he disagrees because his office is over there, but he tells me his office is bigger, and he's right. So, if you ever come to PayPal and you look in the upper left, that's me. I have a great time. I come to work every day. Honestly, I run to the office every day because it's really, really fun, and we'll go into why. But this is what PayPal is. We have 250 million customers around the world. We operate in 200 countries. We service about 19.5 million merchants. Both of those numbers will be updated today because it'll be earnings announcement. And I know what the new numbers are, I just can't say until later on today. We do 8.7 billion transactions. 39% of those are on mobile. So when you think about internet-based transactions, 1 in 6 internet transactions that involve money go through PayPal in one way, shape, or form. If you've ever taken an Uber anywhere and paid for it any way, whether it's credit card, debit card, your PayPal account, Apple Pay, any of those things, it all goes through us. So at the end of the day, that we're powering other people's success. And finally, the 88.7%, 83% of the time when somebody goes to a website and wants to buy something at the end of it, using PayPal, almost 89% of the time, that transaction works the way it was supposed to. Not that it doesn't work the other times, it's that the customer is still engaged. There's a thing called cart abandonment. I buy something, I get to the bottom of the page, I kind of change my mind, I move on. We solve that issue through kind of the seamlessness of experience. To put that in perspective, credit cards in the same situation are about 56%. So it's because you have to key in the 16-digit number, you're not really sure what it is, you don't know what your CVV code is on the back of the card. There's all kind of transaction risk and reward programs that are running in the background that may block those transactions. So our job is really to service the widest number of customers with the most efficient way to make those payments. We also own Venmo. So who here in the room uses Venmo? Oh! There's a Venmo t-shirt on underneath this. Standard issue. Venmo is a perfect example of an amazing surprise. We bought a company called Braintree, which is our foundation for most of our transactions. So PayPal is the brand and the tender type that people use on the bottom of a website or at the bottom of a mobile app. But at the end of the day, it all runs through these railroad tracks that are produced by Braintree. So we bought Braintree for $881 million about 5 years ago. Seems like a lot of money. It was a lot of money. But it really transformed the way that PayPal did business. Braintree had bought Venmo as part of a kind of a package deal with some other technologies they bought for about $500,000. They bought Venmo. Venmo by itself today is worth over $2 billion. So in 5 years, their $500,000 investment is now worth $2 billion. And Braintree is probably worth about $7 to $10 billion of the $880 million that we put into it. And now PayPal is worth about $90 billion. So, it is possible to have a secondary or tertiary event become the defining event in your life, and I think those are if we leave with one message today, it's going to be that influences, positive and negative, are constantly additive to your life. You never know what turns and twists your life is going to take and your career is going to take until you've been able to experience a whole bunch of stimulus. And for us, ferreting through the purchase of Braintree, saying, hey, what's this Venmo thing? Why has it got kind of a good vibe to it? And people like kind of the social structure along with the financial structure, and it turns out to be a massive business for us. And I can guarantee that each one in this room will have those events happen in our personal lives. It'll be somebody you bump into, it'll be a career opportunity, it'll be an assignment that you're given, it'll be something that you learn in one of your classes that will actually divert the route of the future of your life. And it happens in business and it happens personally. And then we got some self-serving top stories there about how awesome we are, which is part of what we do. But we power all the transactions on Uber Eats, Grubhub, Airbnb, Disney. All of those things are all happening through PayPal. You just don't know it because we're fostering somebody else's success. This is an interesting day for me. So people ask me, what's your day like? In fact, they just interviewed me for a magazine, and they said, what's a typical day like? So there's no such thing as a typical day. I come in with a day that's highly prescribed as to what my day is. I mean, my admin, Kathleen, charts out my day literally from, here's when you walk in the room, here's where you'll be blowing your nose if you happen to have a cold, here's where you'll drink the water, and here's all the 50 other things you're going to do that day. But on this particular day, our CEO's office called. He was out of town and said, we have some visiting dignitaries from Saudi Arabia coming in now. It was less important to be from Saudi Arabia then than it is from lately. It's a little more exciting to be from Saudi Arabia. So he called and said, would you go down and meet these dignitaries? They were coming from the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, and they want to strike a deal with PayPal. Would you be interested in hearing their story and see how it goes? I said, okay, that sounds pretty cool. So I dropped the rest of my day and prepare for this. And so shortly before they show up, this is the Minister of Finance, this is the Minister of Economics, and then the woman is the Minister of Banking of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. And like 5 minutes before they're supposed to show up, 2 big giant black SUVs show up, and 6 guys with fully automatic machine guns stand at the entrance to the building I just showed you. So they 3 stand on this side, 3 stand on this side with the machine guns drawn and out. And I thought, my day is about to get a little more interesting. I didn't plan for this, and I didn't bring a machine gun. I feel so and so 5 minutes after that, the Saudi royals come on, and they pull up. This is the same group that was coming to Silicon Valley. They were going to meet with us, and they were going to meet with Google and Facebook. And they wanted to stay at the Four Seasons Hotel, which is a nice hotel in Palo Alto. They bought every single room at the Four Seasons Hotel. All the guests they had them flown out to other hotels or transported out to other hotels. They bought up every restaurant and every meeting room, so that the only people in that hotel were these 17 people that were supposed for an entire Four Seasons. I don't know how much that little day at the beach cost, but it's huge, huge money. And so they come in. Then our security shows up, which our security at PayPal has very few fully automatic weapons, and more like a really intimidating flashlight. And so they do their best, and then these guys all come in. The Saudi family comes in, they come up the escalator, they collapse in around them with the machine guns. And so in this picture, you're seeing me sign this document between us and the Saudi kingdom. And the funny thing was, numbers are all relative, right? Somebody's big numbers or somebody else's small numbers, and PayPal's worth $100 billion or $90 billion today, or whatever it is, which are impressive numbers. The Royal Kingdom here was going to start a incubator for new ideas, because they want to kind of divest from an oil-based socioeconomic pattern to a more diversified approach, and they want to get into other things. So they want to get into arts a little bit, they want to get into fintech, they want to get into the Innovators Lab. And so they were going to seed their new program with some investment money. I'm thinking, oh, that's pretty cool. PayPal's happy to do that. We'll chip in. And they said, well, we're going to start it with $200 billion, and then we're going to work up within 12 months to $500 billion. And that's their seed money for their new program. And I thought, for $500 billion, we could do a lot of really cool things. But that's me actually signing the agreement. Actually, the agreement was already signed, and then they had to take 5 different takes, because apparently the Minister of Finance there didn't like his first 7 pictures, so he just kept doing it until he got the one he wanted. So that was after several. That's why I'm looking at the wrong camera, I think. I don't know. But it was a great day. So one thing I want to talk about is, I know that EVM, when I was at EVM, the magnetism of New York and Boston were almost insurmountable. The idea of a fantastic business career was started and ended in Wall Street or Manhattan somewhere. And if you didn't want to go to Manhattan, because God forbid you're a Red Sox fan, you would go to Boston, and then those were the 2 ecocenters of the entire planet. I'm here to tell you that there is actually life west of Albany. And in fact, if you look at Silicon Valley versus, the Dunder Mifflin crew there at the office, there are distinct differences. It is a very, very different environment. What the cast is wearing there is very reminiscent. Most of the time when I'm at work, this is my normal work gear. Typically it's hoodie and sweatshirt. We're no less intense. In fact, in some cases, we're more intense than our East Coast brothers and sisters. We're just more comfortable when we work. But I would say that there's a palpable difference between the two, East and West. East, to me, is more about focus and financial advancement. And I don't mean that in anything other than that's the way they measure it. It's a focused approach to a very determined outcome and a flawless machine to get there. When I worked for Citi and I worked for Amex, it was about here's the objective. Everybody rallies around the objective. On the West Coast, I think it's a little bit different. The West Coast is the objective is a mission statement. Diversifying experiences, democratizing money, helping the underserved. There might be an overriding mission statement. The sense of urgency, though, isn't around execution on the original plan, but the constant evaluation of other opportunities that will advance that cause. The plan is a destination, but the journey is all the facets of that diamond that you need to put together in order to make that journey seem more real. And by that I mean we spend an awful lot of time worrying about what we don't know about the competition, what we don't know about what the consumer wants. Silicon Valley is very unique in that it is riddled with stories of 5 people sitting around a table with Fritos and Mountain Dew and wiping out an entire industry overnight. Just ask the taxi industry what happened when Uber came on board, right? There's an industry that literally had been in place since 1920 in taxi cabs, bulletproof in terms of their hold on that particular industry, right? Medallions themselves were selling for $2 and $3 million a piece. A couple folks, Todd and some others, sat around thinking about what's a better way to think about transportation. And it's that mantra. It's not thinking about how to build a better taxi business. It's about evaluating that people want to get from point A to point B. What's the best way to do that? And not starting with, what's the best way to optimize for taxis? And so, I encourage all of you to think that way wherever you get to your next business. It's what is the real problem we're trying to solve here? Not an iteration off the existing solution, but what's the real problem? I think there's a lot of examples of that, and we were talking about this earlier, Dean and I, with not only did you revolutionize the way that you evaluated transportation, but you also realize that many people have a very expensive asset that sits idle in their driveway or their garage for hours and hours and hours a day. And the new gig economy, where people can actually sideline a different job during, to offset maybe other parts of their life, you've turned that now asset from something that was idle to something that is actually significantly more valuable to these people. This is a company that 7 years ago, was an idea in somebody's head and now is worth $52 billion, right? So every one of us has those kind of ideas, that kind of pursuit of hey, the objective here is to make people healthier, not to promote more antibiotics. So okay, let's avoid the antibiotics talk and let's talk about total health. And that's the way that Silicon Valley does it. I think the East Coast mentality is more about perfecting the machine. The West Coast is the machine is obsolete. Let's start with the problem statement. I think it's a big difference. So either whether you work on East or left, or East or West, you'll always have an advantage over others if you think bigger than the problem is than an iterative environment. So this is, again, this is my marketing team run amok. I wanted something that talked about a career journey. There are thousands of career journeys. We're all going to be on them. I'm in the middle of one now. It's just, there's multiple changes. There are going to be highs and lows. In fact, it's the highs and lows of a business that actually change the definition of your career. There's a great saying that says, nature abhors a straight line, right? It's by a painter, but essentially, he probably was coming up with this excuse that he couldn't paint a straight line. But nonetheless, he was convinced that nature abhors a straight line. If you see a perfectly straight line in nature, it's probably not occurring naturally. And I think careers are exactly the same way. Careers don't go linearly. In fact, if you're on a linear career, you're probably missing a lot of opportunities. There's a lot of side roads I can guarantee you that you'll be introduced to things that may or may not make sense during your career. The things that don't work out will be as valuable to you as the things that do work out. So making a mistake is part of the journey. Thomas Edison once, was he depressed that he tried 2,000 times to make a light bulb work before he got one to work? He said, no, I found 2,000 ways not to make a light bulb. Like, that's the kind of mentality you have to have when you're building your career, because there will be things that go totally wrong, but you will build off of that just like you do things that go perfectly right. And in fact, it's more dangerous to be successful early, because then you think all of a sudden you're infallible. And infallible leads to things like Blockbuster Video, Sears, and Kmart. Theose are companies that thought that they were the shiznit and nothing could touch them, right? And oh my God, we are the video distributor of the planet. And as long as you come in and get your VHS tapes, which totally rock because they have excellent 1DP visual quality, and we charge you for not rewinding them. That is going to be the horse that we ride into the sunset forever. And Netflix wakes up and says, well, isn't the real problem here that people want to watch a program that they don't own? And how do I do that? And can I get it to them digitally? And can I then not have to have them bring it back to me because I can just turn off access after 3 days or 5 days, or after they've watched it twice, or after 48 hours? So you can create the exact same experience, only you deal with a customer-centric version versus a merchant-centric version. I think that's a huge differentiator. And the difference between why Netflix is having massive, they call it FANG stocks for a reason, right? You have Facebook, Apple, Netflix, and Google, because Netflix is in there. It's not, Facebook or whatever it would be with Blockbuster Video, because they died on the vine, because they were super excited about, they thought they were so awesome with their current model that they never looked anywhere else. And companies that don't do that, another one, which is near and dear to my heart, is GE. When I was in the 80s, I worked for Jack Welch. I used to be on a panel with his, and we used to meet 4 times a year to talk about various businesses. I was like tiny guy on the totem pole, but we ran a business that actually had some insights for him. So I used to meet with him. Amazing leader. Always talking about breaking the current model to make the next one better. Replaced by Jeff Immelt, who thinks that the greatness is a result of his awesome ideas as opposed to the ever-changing agility that was inspired by Jack Welch. He rides GE from a $60 stock price down to $9 and basically ruins a company of took away about $350 billion in market cap, right? So that's the difference between somebody who is inspired by their own awesomeness and someone who's always a worrier about what they don't know. Jack Welch was a worrier. Jeff Immelt was inspired by his own awesomeness, and that normally ends poorly. So that's me on perfection is the enemy of good. And I believe this all the time. My son and I, he's into roller coasters, so apparently I have to be into roller coasters. And see, I am wearing 2 watches, so it's true. So that's me in Spain on top of some Shambhala roller coaster that, honest to God, I think there are centrifuges that do less damage to your red and white blood cells than this thing did. And I must have rode it 14 times to my son. And I believe both of these statements. Perfection is the enemy of good. You're never going to be perfect. And in fact, if you set yourself up to be perfect, all you're going to be is discouraged. And so it's about the experimentation, the flexibility to have that kind of experimentation that does it. Voltaire said this a long time ago, that perfection is the enemy of good, because he saw that a perfect plan, only the time that you take to put together a perfect plan is the time that somebody else is actually putting that plan in place and already iterating on it. And the second piece of this is, during your career, when you're at the bottom, you need to be looking up. And when you're at the top, you need to be worrying why you're going to head back down. And though it's a kind of fresh juxtaposition of where you are relative to where you want to be, that is always going to be changing. Again, if you have a perfectly linear career, the only other thing I'm sure of is that you missed opportunities. If you had a career that did this all the time and you took sideways trips back and forth, I can tell that you've actually grown more professionally and probably more valuable to your organizations or the organizations that you start. And I think it's really critical. So I run the new hire program at PayPal as well, so I get to work with a lot of our new hires. People all ask me, who gets hired at PayPal? It's very simple. I look for three core elements. I look for empathy. I want somebody who can empathize with the customer's plight. So this is exactly what we talked about, Uber and Airbnb and others, and Netflix. I want to empathize with what the customer has to deal with in order to provide or to avail themselves of the services I want to provide. What is the experience that I need to support? If I can't find somebody who's empathetic, or just is a broadcast avenue for my products and services, but really doesn't listen, my grandma always said, you have 2 ears and 1 mouth, you should use them in that ratio. And she was hard of hearing, but I think that's irrelevant. But I think empathy is part of it. Like, every meeting should start about what's important to you, and then let's back into what I have to maybe satisfy that need. Second is curiosity. You're never going to be as good as you need to be. Let's just face it. You can be the world's geniuses, and I know all of you are, but we're never as good as we need to be. There's always something more we can do better. There's something more we can learn. If I wake up in the day and I go to sleep at night not thinking I learned anything, that day was a total waste for me. I really feel like you have to stretch yourself all the time, and I want people who are interested in finding out why they could be better more than explaining to me how awesome they are, right? I hired you because I thought you were awesome. Now let's figure out how much better you can be. And then the third is intellect. Intellect isn't your mental capacity, it's your ability to digest information and come up with original thought. It's not about your ability to memorize 10,000 numbers, your ability to apply a solution to a problem. That's cool, we can all do that. It's really about, can you tell me what I don't know about my business? Can you tell me honestly what you've heard and how that would translate to how I grow the business going forward? It's very different from the application of existing knowledge. This is the creation of additional knowledge. And I think it's really important. So, so this is my leadership team, or some of them changed out a little bit. And you can tell the person who actually put this together because it's the one that says the sexiest emoji alive, Alina Vill. She is my head of marketing. And actually, what you'll notice is that's actually older for you because I have 13 leaders on my team. They do all different roles. 9 of them are women. They are amazingly talented, extremely motivated. And I love the fact that they bring an entirely different perspective because they come from all different walks of life. Alina was a Russian mathematician who comes over here and brings a very kind of artistic math sense to things. Kelly Kobal was a kind of an advanced marketer and now runs a huge business unit for me. Veronica Katz works and helped grow David's Bridal into a world-class business. Paul Parisi, who's lying in this huge vat of poutine here, came to me. He actually was from Amex, and I brought him over. He runs the Canadian business for me. Marcy and her husband are both triathletes. She did 2 startups and sold them successfully, so she came to us with great financial security, but wanted to grow more and more. These are all fantastic people. Debbie Mills is my chief of staff, and she keeps all of us calm with her lotus leaf flower down there. But they are an amazing group, and honestly, some of them have gone on to become CEOs of other organizations now. And so this is about 6 months old. So a couple of them actually moved on to be CEOs of other organizations. So they're really advancing. But here's my tenets of the top advice I give to new hires at PayPal. The first one's probably one of the most important. I always tell them the same thing. 50% of doing your job is doing your job. The other 50% is making someone else successful at their job. People often think that if I'm incredibly talented and I'm incredibly successful at doing the role that you hired me for, that's enough to be successful in an organization. That's enough to be successful in an organization if you're a surgeon. It's not enough to be successful in an organization if you have to work with others. Every organization that I've ever worked with valued, and certainly PayPal more than all of them, values the ability to pull a group with you and be successful. It's about looking left and right. It's about looking at the people next to you saying, how can I help them be successful at their jobs? I go so far in this mantra that I actually set up a comp plan with my team that says 50% of your comp at the end of the year, bonuses and stocks and all those kinds of things that we give you, is based on your individual performance. The other 50% of your comp is based on the performance of your customers. So this is kind of weaving in that empathy theme again. If your customers are successful using the products that you provided to them, either they got new customers, they have more revenue, they have more margin, whatever their metrics, KPIs are for success. If those things have been self-evident to that customer, and they talk about it or they tell me about it, That's the other 50%. And it's the same thing with your coworkers. Your job is to make your coworkers more successful. If you are successful in spite of your coworkers, you're not going to last at PayPal. If your coworkers are successful because of you, even if you had a tough year, you're a superstar at PayPal. And I think there's a big difference in the way that other organizations maybe look at this. The second one is create the environment you'll be most successful in. My team and I laugh all day long. And honestly, we laugh all day long because one, it sometimes can be pretty intense at work. Two, I think that that kind of environment of freedom of conversation allows for somebody to be able to point out areas of potential improvement. The worst thing that can happen to an organization is that everybody's afraid to tell the emperor has no clothes. I call it the ugly baby syndrome, which is, no one wants to call anybody else's baby ugly. But sometimes a baby needs a hat or maybe a mask. And if you're in an environment that everybody's worried about the calling somebody else's idea maybe a little bit off-center, all you have is groupthink into Blockbuster Video. And so an environment where there's this kind of free conversion, there's a lot of what are called collaborative collisions, is really, really healthy. We do it through laughter and kind of joking with each other all the time. It's very intense, but we're always there for each other. But we're also the first one to say, that was an awesome idea in 1974, you might want to speed that one up a little bit. And we kind of rally around that. The third one is, and this is for new hires, we know you can do your job. Like we put the people through an arduous interview process. I mean, honestly, by the time you become a PayPal employee, you're like, half of your life expectancy is gone because of the interview process. But we know you're going to do fantastic at your current role. But what we don't know is all the things that you know that you didn't tell us in the interview, like all the past experiences you had in college that could help us grow a better experience for PayPal. Venmo usage, what you did, how you would like to see it work beforehand. If you came from another organization, a big one or a little one, what ideas can we take from that organization to make PayPal a better place? I think that's a huge difference. Sometimes people think that they're being hired for the job they got that they read on the bio when they applied for the job. That really doesn't turn out to be what your total value is. Your total value is all the other things that you shape the new company with, not just being a puzzle piece that fits into one specific shape. And I think it's a big difference. When you see leaders in an organization, they're constantly suggesting other opportunities for the business to grow, and I think that's super important. Third one is, this one sounds altruistic, but stay human and stay authentic to sound like some kind of folk singer or something. I really believe this. Like, at the end of the day, it's always about people. It's about people you work with, and it's about people you serve. And when you start to distance yourself from that and start talking about numbers, or talking about products, or talking about delivery dates, or talking about global reach or something like that, really it's just an excuse to say that I don't want to think about people anymore. And staying human and staying authentic, understanding that you have faults, even as a leader, so it's further out. The hardest thing about being a leader, and you're all going to have this in varying degrees over the course of your career, the hardest thing about being a leader is that people stop telling you the truth. They only want to tell you things that you hear. And honestly, I go to meetings sometimes, and I put up a couple of charts on some quasi-epiphany I had on the ride in or something that I think is just pure genius. And my leadership team will be the first one to go, bullshit, total crap, because I want them to have that freedom to say, I know you think that's an awesome idea. Here's 5 reasons why it's really stupid. And every one of them are empowered to do that. And I think that really goes to the last point here, which is, in your career, you want to be successful enough to gain autonomy. In other words, you want to be able to make decisions that matter. And varying companies have varying levels of latitude that they give their employees. But more important than earning that autonomy is providing that autonomy for the people that work for you. And we'll all have people that work for us. And the best thing you can do is to foster the autonomy that they need to be successful in their careers. The least successful model I've ever seen in business is that one genius and then 9,000 people that execute on his or her vision. No, invariably, something falls apart in that vision. And even if you throw it back in my face, Steve Jobs was that. Steve Jobs wasn't that. He was half of that, right? Wozniak and others were helping that cause on the other side of the fence that he took a lot of credit for, and failed miserably in the beginning. And they kicked him out of Apple because it didn't work the way he wanted to. It's only when he matured and started thinking about other people's autonomy and their ability to contribute to Apple's greatness that he was brought back in after he started Pixar and some other things that started that groundswell of the trillion-dollar company that Apple's going to be. So there aren't many examples of an organization that grew in perpetuity based on one person's vision. It may have started that way, but all those smart people always hire great people underneath them to help project the image of the organization going forward. So that's my philosophy. This one quick, this one I drumbeat into my son's head all the time. So everybody read the book Good to Great, or the Jim Collins book, right? It's about sustainably great companies and what transfers a company from being considered good to a great company. I have some flaws in the logics of the book because it talks a lot about stock price, which I don't think necessarily is a perfect indicator of a great organization. But a lot of the fundamentals in the book are super sound. But one of the things that he said that kind of got buried underneath a million other things in there that most people lose is the concept of return on luck. And so when you talk to leaders all over the world, they always talk about boy, I was lucky to get to work with so-and-so, or I got this lucky break when I was earlier on in my career that I got to join Goldman Sachs, or I got to join Coca-Cola, or I got to join Ford at just the right time, and they were coming out with the new Mustang, and oh my God, I crushed it after that, and it was amazing, I was so lucky. And what he found was, it's not about luck. Like, all of us are lucky. The one thing I'm sure of is that we're all lucky to be in this room because A, we're at a great university, 2, we have amazing ability to collide with people who have amazing insight into the future. We have great professors. We have great structure to learn. We're all lucky. It's the return on luck that's the differentiator. Like, there's an old story about okay, I didn't tell you anything. So it's an old story about a guy who falls overboard on a boat, right? And he's floating around the ocean, and he's praying, "Oh my God, please, please send me something. Please help me out. Please help me out." And then, pretty soon somebody comes by in the boat and he says, "Well, why don't you jump on?" And the guy said, No, wait, I asked for divine help. I don't need your boat." And then pretty soon somebody else comes by in a boat later on, and then, so-and-so, he says, "I'm still waiting." And then somebody comes by in a surfboard, "Can't help you, I'm waiting for this divine intervention." So, of course, the guy ends up drowning, and he goes up to heaven, and the guy says, "What happened? I kept waiting for you to help me, and you never came." He goes, "I sent 3 boats. Like, what do you want me to do?" And I feel like that's how luck happens. Like, luck is all around you all the time. You're lucky to meet somebody. You're lucky to be in a university like this. You're lucky to have the parents that you have. You're lucky to have the friends that you have. But it's your return on luck. It's your ability to see the opportunities within that luck that's provided. Luck isn't a Powerball ticket. Luck is a happenstance event. It's an idea that you have. It's 2 people getting together and thinking a little differently about something. And the difference between that luck and luck that just evaporates into the ether is the fact that you act on it. And so it's, fortune favors the prepared mind. I absolutely believe that. But it's not prepared for a specific event. It's prepared for the thousands of events that you'll have over the course of your lifetime that could potentially be life-changing. Some of them may be, more lucky than others in terms of how apparent it is, but they can all be super influential. So I tell my son this all the time in school, like, "Oh, that person's so lucky, they're just really good at math," or, "Oh my goodness, that guy's so lucky, he's really good at sports." Like, he's not lucky. That person found some influence in their life and then turned into that wind to make it as advantageous as possible, and that's how our careers go. I feel the same way. Like, I'm lucky to work at PayPal, but not because I was sleeping under a park bench and PayPal found me. I researched PayPal, I was able to intersect with PayPal, and then eventually I ended up at PayPal, and now I try to make it a better place for other people. So that's kind of my philosophy on life and the pursuit of happiness, which is a pretty broad topic. But I would love to take any questions that you have, and I don't know what kind of time you have, but we're going to finish the show. Yeah? First one's always the bravest, by the way. Love it.
In looking at the future of fintech, what are you all at PayPal excited for?
Well, here's the the dirty laundry of fintech. Fintech is an amazing place to operate in. The problem is, in most cases, we only significantly touch about 20% of the world's population. More of the world's population is available to fintech. In other words, they have a smartphone, they have access to the internet. They have, and even in the sub-Saharan Africa and in the middle of India and Pakistan and lesser developed countries, they still have the capability of connecting to the experiences that fintech can provide. But what excites us most is that the other 80% we need to get to. We wake up in the morning thinking about what we haven't done for those people as opposed to applauding what we have done in fintech. PayPal's a great place. PayPal does amazing work trying to democratize the service. In other words, if you're underserved, if you're underbanked, you can use your smartphone and emulate a lot of the state-of-the-art products that you could only get at top banks. But we haven't done enough. We haven't done enough for a huge swath of the North American population, and we certainly haven't done enough for a global population. So, when I get excited about this business, this is actually not that we've grown the top line significantly, it's actually we've grown the customer base. And so when that 250 goes to 500 or goes to $1 billion, then I feel like we're starting to make an impact on the world the way we thought we would. So, that's
She's really brave. She should be writing a finance exam right now.
Well, that's awesome. And what do you get an A?
I'm going.
I get one A to give out. They told me that was part of it. Right.
Good luck with that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
So did you have a person who was a leader who had an impact on you, and how did he have that impact we worked with?
So I've had several great managers over the years, and they came from all walks of life. Some of them taught me, there wasn't one who redefined me. I would say that there were a couple of life lessons I had. One of them was this mantra of, it may not be your fault, but it is your problem. And I've always taken that to heart, which is, it doesn't matter why we have the issue we have. And it doesn't matter that it was or wasn't your fault. It becomes your problem if you're part of the organization. And it kind of goes back to that 50% rule, right? Which is, I own 50% of somebody else's burden because that's part of my job. And I try to live that way every day. There's a group of 4 of us at PayPal that kind of run the major businesses. So we run about 95% of the operating income of PayPal around the world. And every one of us has problems every day, and the other 3 always look in to make sure that they can help. And so there's not a problem that Robert has that Louise doesn't have. If Louise has a problem, I have a problem. If I have a problem, Louise has a problem, and I think that's a critical element. It was a guy named Darryl Brown at American Express that taught me that lesson. And I kind of keeps me grounded all the time because, again, compensation-wise, it's critical as well. Like I'm not a one-person, poetry reading act where it's only me. Right? I'm part of a much larger organization that has to perform, beyond expectations in order to be successful, and it can't be just me, right? It has to be the other people. So when they have a problem, it's my problem too.
Recognizing that you've got PayPal, a pretty shiny apple, and you're just trying to get more people to buy your apples. What are you doing? What are the new technologies? What are the new things that are coming that are going to be the oranges and the pears?
Yeah, that's good. Well, so a couple of different ways to answer that question. One is, how do we kind of accelerate the Apple sales, which is AI, blockchain are certainly leading the charge there. It's knowing the customer. So that's doing more of what we do better. When you talk about oranges and bananas and pears, it's really about how do we then create the way to establish commerce. I'll give you one example. One of the projects we're working on right now is most new cars have the ability to actually connect to the internet in one way, shape, or form. Like, you may not know it, but they are sending signals up for repair purposes, for mileage purposes. If you're odd enough to buy that little thing that Progressive signed that puts in underneath it, basically your tattletale for all of your speeding. Maybe that also does it. But we have the ability, we're experimenting with the ability of both Honda and BMW right now to have the car actually talk to gas pumps, to have the car talk to toll booths, so that instead of buying that fast pass or instead of having to get out and dip your card into the thing, the car will actually send a signal to the gas pump that you're ready to buy the gas, and then we'll just centrally bill off an account that's tied to the car. We're also doing a lot with facial recognition in China, so it's not about cards. Our COO has a great expression, which is our in-store strategy of tap and go, and using the phone to tap and pay for things, because that's a great solution in search of a problem. When I go to China, we have a lot of relationships with Baidu and Tencent and some of the big operators over there. It's all facial recognition, and so when they walk up to a vending machine, it recognizes them and then spits out whatever they want to have. And I think there's a lot of elements of that connected commerce that we're barely touching the surface on. In fact, it's actually a disadvantage in some cases to be in North America because we have such a strong infrastructure. Whereas in Africa and India and China, they have the ability to start from tabula rasa, right? A blank slate on, hey, if I could snap my fingers and it was magic and I could create a perfect environment for my products and services, or to elevate the customer experience, what would it be? And they can start there, as opposed to, well, I have 12 million terminals out there and I don't want to switch those overnight. So we're working with that kind of thing right now. But that, to me, is the future of the business. So, super cool.
In your industry, do you expect new technology to create more jobs, or do you think more jobs will get automated? And have you seen that happening in the past?
So most automation is made to replace a slower process. And the slower process is usually some human intervention, right? So old jobs are subject to replacement by more advanced technology. New jobs are creating that new technology that then replaces the old jobs. So it's not about being the world's greatest buggy whip manufacturer or blacksmith. Those are super cool professions. The problem is you have to be able to read the tea leaves and say, the future of the business is X. Like, I'm not going to sell horseshoes, I'm going to sell tires. I'm not going to sell tires, I'm going to sell jet fuel. I'm not going to sell jet fuel, I'm going to sell, whatever, the Hyperloop tube or whatever it is going to be. And I think that's the issue. So there will always be more employment as long as more people are thinking about what's necessary to be for the consumer experience or B2B experience. But there will be less traditional jobs as defined by 10 years ago, but more jobs that we haven't thought of. And so think of it this way. If I were to tell you that taxi cabs were going away, you would say there'd be a lot of unemployed taxi drivers, right? Yep, there would be. But now all of a sudden I've energized 1 million Uber drivers. Now, did I think about that in the first place when I thought about automation of taxi cabs and dispatchers and things like that? No, but then it twists itself into an economic model that actually requires more resources, but in a different capacity. I think that's the way it moves. The service industry is just that. It's not just servicing what we know; it's servicing what we need to know. And I think that's there's a lot of talk about NAFTA and taking away jobs and whether they're moving to Mexico or they're moving somewhere else. That's not the issue. The issue is you have to make sure that you're constantly looking around for that curiosity and that empathy and that intellect to say, where is the puck going, and I want to be there. And that way you never have to worry about being replaced by a machine.
A lot of PayPal users, like small business owners, have been sort of switching over to Venmo because of lack of fees. So obviously PayPal is losing some money on those 2.9% commissions. How has PayPal reacted to that rising situation?
That was just hurtful. No. Well, thankfully we own Venmo too. But here's the issue. Think of this as I would rather make less money with more people than more money with fewer people. The model for this kind of distributed economy is if I can interact with the highest number of people, the most number of times, I actually have more influence over my ability to create an environment that's successful. Think of it this way. Facebook, social interaction, freeware, right? It just goes back and forth. How does Facebook monetize that? Through the knowledge that they have about that consumer behavior or people's interest or the advertising that they can sell on it. In PayPal's world, we call it TPA, transactions per active. If I can increase the number of transactions per active, in other words, times that people move to direct their commerce through a PayPal tool, I now know more about those consumers, so I can be more valuable to their lives in future products and services, or more valuable to the merchants. So we spend an awful lot of time worrying about the amount of data that we're able to assemble on the buyer experience versus making individual money on each transaction. But it's a good point. I mean, I think if you look at the two different models of where I came from, Amex is about perfecting the margin on a particular, what they call it, CLV, client lifetime value, right? Customer lifetime value. And it's about making more money out of a customer that we currently have and attending to their needs in that narrow band of Amex world. Ours is a different model. It's about what can we do for the customer, and then once we know more about those customers, how can we introduce products and services like PayPal credit, or maybe using your Venmo account to buy things at the movie theater, or at Live Nation, or at Uber, to pay for an Uber ride, where we wouldn't necessarily charge $29 and $30, but we might charge $175 or $155. So it's, you know, my CEO just reminded me this morning before I got in this morning, which is, you worry about revenue, I'll worry about margin. In other words, my job is to make the top of the funnel as wide as it possibly can. His job is to manipulate all of the services and the OpEx down to that so that it pops out the middle at the widest possible nozzle. But to your point earlier, we don't see it as a cannibalization from a profitable to a non-profitable. We see it as another positive interaction with the consumer that adds to the war chest of information that we have to bring to merchants and consumers.
We have time for one more question. Don't be shy.
Yeah.
Okay. Olivia.
Is there an experience that you had at UVM or anytime after getting your first job and you like that process of finding banking and also finance?
So here's an example of an experience, a negative experience that actually changed my life. So I believe in the power of negative experiences just as much as I do in positive experiences, and I think avoiding mistakes is a bigger mistake than trying to be perfect. So as I'm paying whatever, we would set up these 401k plans for small businesses, and we would talk to people. I would actually meet with the pending retirees or workers about, hey, setting up a system that they would put money away, and then they and when they were 65 or 62 or 59 and a half, they could start drawing on it. What I didn't like about that experience was, I loved setting those up, I loved having that interpersonal connection. I didn't like the fact that the stock market would go up and down, totally independent of whatever I wanted, right? I was merciless to make that change. I could do the best I could do, but after that, it was up to the zephyrs of the market to carry the results one way or the other. It was very difficult for me to wake up in the morning knowing that I had done what I thought was a great job the day before, and then have people nervous over work that we done. Now, over time, Warren Buffett, right, invest, and it's not timing markets, it's timing markets, and all those things that make you feel better about yourself. But in actuality, people think very short term. I invested yesterday at $5,000, and today it's worth $4,700. It's going wrong. And I didn't like that feeling. I didn't like the idea that I couldn't control more of the end result. I could only control the setup. So I looked for opportunities where I actually had more influence over the result than I even did on the front end. And it also means that you have to be much more collaborative because you have to have experts all the way down the process to make sure that somebody's delivering those. And so I think that was an influencer for me. And I felt strongly that if I did a good job, I wanted to be pretty certain that the results for the client or the merchant or the consumer were going to be positive. It may take time, we're going to have ups and downs, and my system might not be perfect all the time, but the expectation was good in means good out, not good in means let's see what happens and I'm sure it'll be fine, right? Because that's an uncertain place to live, so that was good. I missed your question, Jim.
That's
What do you think the future of Coinstar and Western Union is in this context?
Yeah, I would invest a lot of money in this. Sure. Here's the thing. Actually, they do. I like both of those companies, and here's the reason I like both of those companies. Maybe they're not a growth engine, but why I like those two companies, the service they perform. There is a desperate need to turn physical money into digital money. There are very few places you can do that. We just announced this big partnership with Walmart, collaboration with Walmart, where you can go in to Walmart with hard currency and give it to the cashier, and without a fee or a very small fee, they will transfer that into your PayPal account. So what I like about Western Union is their ability to cross-border. We have services to that, Zoom and PayPal does that, and Venmo does that, to be able to do peer-to-peer. But more important is digitizing a hard currency consumer. And I told the story earlier today. I was at the tire store 2 days ago putting tires on my car. And if you ever want to see the slice of Americana, you just hang out at a tire store, because tires don't understand if you're rich or poor or brand new to the country or been living here since the Mayflower. The great equilibrium is going to buy tires, right? And so I bought my tires. I was sitting next to a migrant worker who had a van who was buying all tires also. And when it time to pay for my tires, I went up, put my credit card down, and linked to my PayPal account. All the magic happened. Everybody's good. I sat back down. This guy gets up. He takes out an envelope from a check cashing place that he had went on earlier, payday loan kind of thing. Took out of an envelope all these $100 bills for these tires that he was buying, and laid them out, like a roulette table, and then got some cash back, and then put this envelope back in his pocket. Enormous amount of risk in that transaction, right? I mean, the guy could lose it, the guy could get robbed. I mean, clearly there was boatloads of expenses going on there. He had no visibility into that transaction once he had it. And I thought to myself, it's like an ad for what we're doing with Walmart and what we also do with others, which is this guy should be able to go to a place, take that money that he now has earned, hard-earned money, put it into a digital environment where he now can dole it out in penny-level increments if he wants to, with perfect safety of money that he hasn't yet spent. And to me, it was like, you don't get misty over cash transactions, but I was like, this is why I do this job, because this guy who's working super hard, I'm sure works easily as hard as I do, what he does, is struggling to make a simple payment where for me it's not even an afterthought of an afterthought. And this guy has to go through histrionics to make that same transaction that I made in 5 seconds. And he probably spent an hour going from the check phase of his payment to the cash phase and now paying for those tires. It was like a microcosm of why I'm in this business. So that's what I think so. But thank you very much.
Yeah.